This is the fifth cattle steer that's been mutilated since mid-spring of this year.
North American livestock farmers are also dealing with a strange phenomenon that's been classified as a close encounter of the second kind. Although this one is as repulsive as the crop circles are beautiful. Since the mid-60s, some ranchers in the American and Canadian West have been finding dead animals in their fields. Investigators have dismissed predators as a probable cause because there are rarely any tracks around the body, not even the tracks of the animal itself. The carcasses are usually neatly cut open, organs removed with surgical precision, and as Joel Bradshaw discovered on his ranch in Arkansas, the aftermath is an oddly bloodless scene.
The blood had been taken away. There was no blood nowhere. You could take a white piece of cloth and lay in it, and you didn't get no blood or nothing.
Some have said cult followers are to blame, but medical evidence makes that unlikely. Tissue samples sent to Oregon State University for testing showed that high heat had been used to make the strange rippled incisions, heat like that of a medical laser. Many farmers say they don't need medical evidence. They know their fields very well, and animals and humans would leave evidence behind.
Human beings will always make mistakes along that line. They'll forget something or drop something, but there's no sign. You can go off 50 yards around it and never find anything.
As with crop circles, UFO sightings often seem to precede the mutilations.
There have been possibly 15,000 of these cases in the United States and Canada since the 60s. And you know, you look at the records, you look at if there's anybody been prosecuted, has anybody been arrested, and you don't find that. You don't find any prosecutions, you don't find any arrests. In a forensic sense, you use all the information, you look at all of it. And when you get all of that information and you run it through a sieve, you come out that there is some other non-human entity doing this.
So who or what is plucking animals from their fields, only to return them later, dead and missing some of their organs? Journalist and documentary filmmaker Linda Moulton Howe, who helped bring the mystery to light with her book, An Alien Harvest, has a theory. The mutilations are part of some incredible extraterrestrial genetic research that is linked to the phenomenon of human abductions.
What's unknown is the genetic experiment to make something from our DNA, the cattle DNA, other animal DNA, and take it away somewhere? Or is it to make something that is going to cohabit with us on this planet? Or some reason that is impossible for us to even imagine?
Some of those animals have all the blood drained from them, with no signs of the blood being on the animal or on the ground near the animal. Predators don't do that.
Whoever is doing this uses laser-like precision, and there is evidence of high heat in many of the excisions on the animals. And it appears that some sort of laser-like technique is being used to cut the animals up.
This is real, and for some reason, it's in someone's agenda to keep this covered up. Now, if people were aware of how many animals were killed in this manner in the last 30 years, they would be shocked, because it numbers in the many, many thousands.
For Frank and Bonnie Martin, two ranchers outside of Las Vegas, one mutilated steer was shocking enough.
Bonnie came out of the back of the house, out of the back door there, and seen the steer laying over here by the stock tank that we're walking over to now.
I could see that this cow was obviously dead. On my approach to him, you could see where the rectum had all been gutted out, and so I thought, now that's really weird. And then I walked up around the head of him, and you could see where the left ear had been removed. And when I say removed, it was not as if it was shredded, like if dogs had pulled from it. It was completely removed in a razor-type incision or laceration.
Baffled, Bonnie asked Dr. Garth Lamb, a local vet, to perform an autopsy. What he found was unlike anything he had ever seen.
There's no penis on this thing. And how that was removed in that manner is beyond me.
Back in his office, Dr. Lamb pored over x-rays, searching for a cause of death.
This is a frontal view of the animal, the eyes being here, shooting straight down through the head. This being the left side, you can see that the bone has been removed with the cut on the ear, this portion of bone that is normal over here is not present on this side.
But what really disturbed Lamb was the blood, or rather, the lack of it.
There was some blood in the body. There was some blood on the ground. Probably a tenth of what you would normally think of seeing from the type incision that was made. But I don't know how this animal died. It had no external form of trauma that would have killed it.
Bonnie and Frank Martin are also baffled by the fact that the cow was found within 100 feet of their bedroom.
My wife sleeps with a real light ear, and for something to have happened as major as what had to have happened here with this big steer and her not hear it is unheard of.
In fact, even trying to approach the Martin's cow would have called for extreme stealth.
These cattle are left out in the pasture all the time, and we deliberately do that to keep them so that they don't get used to human contact, don't get used to other animal contact either. And closer we get, or the more aggressive that we get with walking towards them, the faster they'll move away from us. So you can see how much of a what the degree of difficulty would be for somebody to come sneak up on one of these things and try to kill it.
Compounding the mystery are the strange helicopters that Bonnie spotted over the ranch. She noticed the first one a few days before the steer was mutilated. With a large military base nearby, Bonnie is very familiar with their aircraft. She could tell these choppers were different.
And then about 2 or 3 days after the incident, I seen another helicopter that looked exactly like the first one, flying extremely low, all by itself, and more of a gray-green color than a camouflage color if it was military. But military doesn't fly low like that. They fly their trips and then they're out of here. But this one was extremely peculiar because it flew real low and the odd shape of it.
As strange as they seem, the events on the Martin Ranch do not surprise George Knapp, a television journalist who has been reporting on cattle mutilations, UFOs, and other unexplained phenomena for 7 years.
This case is virtually identical to cases that I've investigated all over the country and which have been reported all over the world. Same symptoms, no tracks, no blood in the animal, no blood on the ground, no signs of struggle, no one hears anything, no suspects have ever been caught or arrested, and we just don't know who's doing it.
In the tiny town of Fife, Alabama, cattle mutilations have practically become an epidemic. Over 40 have turned up in the past 2 years. Rancher Ricky Blackwell found one of his cows dead last winter.
The day we found our cow, it was laying right in here at the edge of the woods. It had 3 incisions, and one was around his milk sac and his flank, about the size of a basketball. The other one was his vagina, was about the size of a softball, and then his upper lip was cut out.
Just like Bonnie Martin in Nevada, Ricky and his friends spotted a mysterious helicopter just before they found the carcass.
From what I could tell, it didn't have any marks on it. Nothing, no numbers, no nothing. It was just solid black. Just sitting and hovering. It hovered for at least 30 minutes over in that spot.
And when we got out here, after we found the cow, we wondered, reckon it had anything to do with it because it was flying kind of back in this area here.
The residents of Fife are a little more cautious than they used to be.
Carry a gun where everywhere you go now. Like they say, the helicopters better watch out around here. They're going to get shot down if they come zooming in.
Less than an hour away from Ricky Blackwell's pasture, Tommy Cole found one of his cattle mutilated. The pattern was all too familiar.
His penis had been removed, and also his rectum had been removed. I knew immediately it was not an accident, and I knew that it was not animals. I've had many animals to kill cattle here, in the past. I've seen them and seen the conditions of the cattle when the animals had torn them apart and killed them, and this was absolutely different. And I found out right quick that no particular person had been seen in the pasture in that area, but that a helicopter had been seen in the area of the pasture and had landed inside the pasture right near where this steer was found.
Who or what could be responsible for these mutilations? Although Tommy Cole is a police detective, he is still baffled.
My theory is that it's some sort of an experiment going on that I can't nail down. I've done a lot of investigation on this and put a lot of time and work in it, but I have not been able to come up with any specific person or persons that's responsible for it.
Back in Fight, another professional investigator is searching for answers. Former policeman Ted Oliphant has personally looked into 35 mutilations.
I've heard a wild variety of theories about what the helicopters are doing with the cows. Some say it's genetic experimentation, or they're testing toxins on animals, or pesticides, or something like this, or perhaps the effect of high voltage lines over the animals. You know, there's a lot of different theories, but none of them convince me.
Because many of the cattle wounds are so clean and bloodless, some investigators have speculated that lasers might be involved.
Whoever is doing it has a capability of taking laser units out into the field. And we know from just a few weeks ago, an announcement out of Kirtland Air Force Base, that they now have a portable laser that is used by, quote, special operations teams in the field.
Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico is the location of the Phillips Laboratory. Encounters was allowed to bring cameras into the restricted laboratory to shoot an experimental project called the Laser Med Pack.
It's a completely self-contained laser system that was built for combat medics to use out in the field for three things, basically: cutting, coagulating, and closing wounds. Because if you're cutting in vascular tissue, you actually induce a lot of bleeding, and the laser prevents that from happening. You actually cauterize as you cut, and you get a very clean, dry cut.
We asked Captain Keeper whether or not he was aware of reports linking his experimental laser with cattle mutilation.
I've heard them in tabloids dealing with UFOs, but that's about it. Yeah, I don't think that would be a kind of a viable experiment of any sort.
The research director of UFO magazine also dismisses the idea that military lasers are responsible for these mutilations.
They certainly could have been used, but it's my personal opinion that they weren't used. If they did have some type of operation involving cattle, why would they chance going into the civilian community when they could do it on their own military reservations with complete impunity?
So if not the military, then who?
Cattle hemoglobin has been proven over the years through refinement processes as being suitable for use as blood plasma for human beings in the event of some type of an emergency through a refining process. And because the fact that cattle chromosomes are very close to human chromosomes, the idea has arisen that perhaps, if in fact it is an aspect of the overall UFO phenomenon conducting these operations, then perhaps they may be going after the cattle in an attempt to answer questions about human beings.
But to ranchers like Frank Martin, whose herd is now one cow short, nothing makes any sense.
If it's truly aliens and they've got these vaporizing capabilities, why not just vaporize this puppy? And the next day I walk out to count the cows, instead of having 35, I got 34, and you scratch your head and wonder what's going on. If it's government, they could raise their own cattle. I got no answers. I don't have any answers for those kind of circumstances. But it is strange. The strangest things ever happened in my life.
The cut on her jawbone was just real sharp, precise cut.
A large incision, removing its sex organs, rectum had been cored out, tail cut off.
Her milk sac had been cut out on the left side in an oval about the size of a basketball.
It's a mystery that remains unexplained after 30 years of investigation. Some claim alien forces are responsible. Others claim cult activity or secret government testing. Cattle mutilation. The most recent outbreak appears to have been in a 3-county area of northeastern Alabama. Over 50 cases of mutilation have been reported in just the past 6 months. Organs appear to have been removed with surgical precision. So far, the farmers in the area have lost more than $40,000 in livestock. With such tremendous losses, the police department in Fife, Alabama has launched an intensive investigation. Ted Oliphant is a Fife police officer who has personally investigated more than 30 cattle mutilation cases.
We're finding the same thing over and over again. The sex organs have been removed from the animals, the tongues have been cut out of them, the jaw has been stripped into oval, clean to the bone, and all without blood.
Who or what is responsible for the seemingly ritualistic slaughter of these cattle? Researchers have little to go on beyond these decomposing carcasses. And despite attempts to prove that a sinister force is at work here, some experts believe the mutilations are all the result of natural causes.
It leads us to think maybe that animal is getting mutilated, but what's happening is predators, vultures, are also involved with that process.
The indication that the predators are not responsible for these animals being cut on is the evidence of high heat at the excision, evidence of high heat in excess of several hundred degrees or more, according to the pathologist who studied the tissue samples.
That pathologist is Dr. John Altschuler. He has studied suspect cattle tissue for the last 4 years.
The tissue at the incisional areas is very firm and very hard and looks burned. And the microscopic evidence clearly indicates that heat has been applied, and predators, to my knowledge, cannot do that. Here we have a photomicrograph taken of the hide from an animal where we've had evidence of burning. The arrow shows a pink color to the tissue underneath the lining of the hide. As we move towards the cut area, you notice a definite color change from pink down here to blue up here. This is a very typical change of exposure of tissue to heat.
Other unusual evidence has been found at some alleged mutilation sites. A white flaky substance was recovered from one Alabama location. Officer Oliphant had it analyzed at one Eastern university.
And they determined that it was composed of aluminum, titanium, silicon, and oxygen. Aluminum and oxygen, or aluminum oxide, is what's used in the styptic pencil that I use if I've cut myself after shaving, and that stops bleeding. Perhaps that has something to do with why the animals don't have blood on them at the excision lines.
In more than half of the Alabama cases, farmers report seeing an unmarked helicopter leaving the scene just before or after a cattle mutilation.
They had a chopper in behind my barn. Had all my cattle rounded up in behind the barn. The chopper, when it appeared, it was kind of unordinary. It looked like it's sitting on a box, you know. Of course, it was big enough to get a cow in, you know. If they catch them hovering over their cattle and pasture, I'd probably shoot him. Probably shoot him.
Loud helicopter noise, sounded like it was right over the trailer. Went out the front door, went over to my car, returned the seat, pulled out a handgun. I walked towards the edge of the trailer. I saw the helicopter. It's a light blue helicopter, no markings, no numbers, and it was hovering about 15 foot above the tree. I dropped my holster, and the helicopter veered off.
I think the greatest mystery of this case is the lack of physical evidence that we've found at the sites. Only in one case did we find that white flaky material. We haven't been able to find footprints, we haven't been able to find tracks or wheel marks or anything to indicate that anybody's even been in there. How do you explain that? We can't.
My tendency to believe is it's something of a lot higher intelligence than what we've got in normal everyday occurrence around here.
Don't really have any ideas who could be doing it or the reasons behind it, you know. You could get most of the parts they removed from a slaughterhouse for free, you know.
Yes, sir, I run a meat processing plant, and I made a statement that I would donate them jawbone, the blood, their rectum, and whatever, you know, if they just asked me for it, and then they wouldn't have to kill these farmers' cattle like they do.
Despite the willingness of the ranchers to cooperate with authorities in a larger-scale investigation, most government officials are sticking to the predator theory. They do not believe that high-tension lines in the area are somehow related to the mutilations. They also deny charges that the government is mutilating cattle in order to support new technology, replacing human blood with bovine blood. And what about the unmarked helicopters? Do they point to the existence of a conspiracy?
I think the helicopters are doing the same thing we're doing on the ground. I think they're investigating who's doing this. They're trying to find out too. And because of their behavior, it's obvious that they'd rather have us think that they're doing it than what's actually happening.
Whoever or whatever is responsible may never be known. The silent testimony of these mutilation victims has not been able to resolve the mystery.
I lost 49 head of cattle to the mutilations.
I lost them in less than 3 weeks. At that time of the mutilations and later on, we saw many lights up in the sky. We could not interpret where they were coming from.
The eye was gone. The rectal area had a perfect round cut. The sex organs had been removed. The tongue was gone. No blood, no flies, nothing was around it.
I believe this to be the greatest single unsolved serial crime spree of the 20th century.
They come at night, mysterious craft piloted by an unseen crew. The morning light reveals yet another mutilated steer. It's happened hundreds of times over 3 decades. State investigators have come and gone. Natural predators, they insist. But cattle ranchers are not satisfied. They've seen things no known predator could do. Field researcher Chris O'Brien has gained their trust.
This animal is obviously a roadkill, but any report of a downed animal in the area I'd like to check out because of the ongoing problem that we have with the mutilations.
In September of 1967, the first documented animal mutilation occurred in this field and drew worldwide attention. Researchers came from far and wide to investigate. 30 years later, interest has waned, but local ranchers are still forced to cope with dead animals.
The night before, I saw the cow alive, and she had a calf with her, and they looked healthy to me. And by next morning, early in the morning, she was mutilated.
Eli Hornick has been running cattle in northern New Mexico for more than 14 years. His cattle have been the most recent victims of the mutilation mystery.
Last 2 years, we've lost 10 head of cattle, and 9 yearlings and 1 cow. And you know, you're talking about quite a bit of money. Something that's pretty interesting, if a human doesn't mess with it or something doesn't disturb it, the birds, coyotes, they'll just leave it alone.
Hornick's cattle showed the classic signs of mutilation: precise incisions, a conspicuous lack of blood, and no physical evidence of a predator, man or animal, at the crime scene.
There's never any tracks, never any blood. It's a real clean deal.
Normally, when you arrive at an animal mutilation site, you'll find basically that there's no evidence whatsoever. There's no blood at all. There's no tracks, no cigarette butts. All the evidence indicates that the animals are being dropped from the air. So it seems to most researchers that the animals are being taken somewhere else, being experimented on, and then being dropped back where they were found.
Livestock Inspector Jerry Valerio has investigated the mutilations, and they fit the pattern he's seen in dozens of other cases.
The incisions are done real precise. Every incision that we've dealt with has been almost identical to every animal that has been mutilated.
Most of these cattle mutilations features perfectly circular cuts that have indication of high heat that has been used to make the cuts.
Despite the consistent pattern of bloodless surgical incisions, state and federal authorities insist predators like coyotes and foxes are responsible. For them, case closed.
I've seen a lot of animals that have been torn up by coyotes and other predators, birds mostly. And these incisions were just like a doctor would do in the hospital.
When you see an animal of this nature that's been mutilated, it's clean, no blood, it's not done by predators.
Dr. John Altshuler is a pathologist who studied tissue samples from hundreds of cattle mutilations over the past 5 years.
A predator, even with the accuracy of gnawing and biting, would have jagged borders. The fact that the tissue at the incisional areas is very firm and very hard and looks burned. And the microscopic evidence clearly indicates that heat has been applied, and predators, to my knowledge, cannot do that.
What could create these burnt-edged incisions is a highly sophisticated portable laser.
Lasers have the ability to actually cauterize the wound, stop the bleeding as you're cutting.
But no portable laser is powerful enough to cut and cauterize masses of livestock tissue. At Kirtland Air Force Base, Colonel Michael Prairie demonstrates the world's most precise portable laser.
Going through a 1/4 inch of flesh, you'd have to take several passes, maybe 5 or 10 passes to get through. The precision of the cut is limited to the precision of the operator. If you needed to make a circular cut with very tight tolerances, you'd have to find some other way, some kind of mechanical system to make such a cut.
If our government doesn't have laser technology capable of these mutilations, who or what does?
The causes behind these mutilations is absolutely unknown. I believe that there's multiple groups involved in this for various reasons. The tissue that is being excised from these animals is the fastest regenerating tissue in the bodies and have residual elements of their environment in them.
Anonymous groups with advanced technology mutilating livestock? Sounds impossible, but consider this new theory. Biotech companies are fighting a super-secret war to be the first to find an artificial substitute for human blood. A lot of them are using the hemoglobin in cattle blood as their base. The first company to develop this artificial blood could have a $10 billion market all to themselves. The stakes are high, and they don't want the competition to know what they're doing.
Whenever these mutilations occur, there was always a sighting of helicopters around the area.
In a lot of cases, strange lights have been seen around mutilation sites, and most often, helicopters are seen in and around mutilation sites. It's like someone is monitoring these areas where these animal deaths are occurring. People ask me, why are they leaving these carcasses lying around these pastures? I think these carcasses are taken and then returned is somehow to instill fear in the rancher.
I am over my anger, but I'm still very confused, and I'm still scared as to what can happen in the future.
There's somebody somewhere that knows what's doing this. You know, we need to get it out in the open and try to get it stopped.
Until we get people to report these cases and get the help of state and federal law enforcement officials, we're spinning our wheels. There are no answers. There's just thousands of questions and thousands of dead animals.
The tongue was missing. The meat, after we'd cut it open, looked like it had been cooked or something.
When we found the animal, it couldn't have been there no longer than 12, 13 hours because I was there at 6:30 in the evening. I was back there at 7 o'clock the next morning. It wasn't maybe 600 yards from the ranch house. And this animal it had been mutilated. There's no blood, no tracks, no sign of nothing. And this animal was already decomposing, like it had been dead for 4 or 5 days.
If it was satanic cults, you'd have blood all over everything. If it was predators, you'd have blood all over. These cuts are very uniform, very smooth. The eye looks like it has just been sucked out.
It's a pattern that continues to be all too familiar for many ranchers in the Southwest. And now there's a strange new development.
We've had a disturbing new trend where ranchers inadvertently are touching these carcasses, and they're developing what could be, I guess, likened to a chemical-like burn.
I stuck my thumb in the animal's mouth, and when I stuck that my thumb in there, well, it burned for about 2 weeks. I mean, I would say it would be like a battery acid burn or something, you know, like that.
Since our last report, the border area between New Mexico and Colorado has been hit hard. Ranchers there tell sightings that animals are decomposing at an unnaturally rapid rate, and the body count is up.
We're having mutilations that are occurring on almost a weekly basis.
They seem to be expanding outwards from this area. About a week and a half after the sighting segment aired, we had 2 cases in Saguache County, Colorado, which is about 80 miles north of here.
I think they're coming down out of the air with some kind of air equipment, picking them up, taking them, bringing them back and laying them down.
Eli Hornick is fed up with the seeming lack of interest in his and other ranchers' plight. Mutilation reports gather dust on government desks, while animals continue to die. And even as the number of dead cattle rises, official interest in the mystery is declining.
Somebody, somewhere in this country knows what's going on. I mean, it just seems like every time we try to do an investigation, try to get something started, it comes to a dead end. We can't get senators, congressmen, you know, it just get a lot of publicity, but it just dies. You know, it doesn't seem like, you know, it's a crime. You know, this is real monetary value. This is my living. You know, it's cost me thousands of dollars already. They're taking my living away from me. It's just outright thievery. Why isn't somebody doing it? Something about it.
Our government has the capacity to monitor any square acre of ground in this country, if they want to, if they are not part of the problem and they are truly as baffled about this as the ranchers and investigators like myself are, let's catch whoever or whatever is mutilating cattle.
Ranchers and private investigators say they smell a rat. They are beginning to believe that there is a government conspiracy of silence at the heart of the mutilation phenomenon.
We was cutting hay in one of the meadows, and this helicopter was right there. It looked to me like a big military-type helicopter. No numbers. And that night we had a mutilation.
I think people are scared to pay attention. They're scared. This is something of the unknown, and they just don't want to get involved. And it's a very frightening thing, especially when you see these things. You know, my God, they could come after me. Maybe they'll start on humans next. I hope not.
They may call this part of New Mexico God's country, but if you're a cattle rancher here, this is hell on earth. Bizarre livestock death, commonly known as cattle mutilation, continues to occur with alarming regularity. Recently, a sightings team returned to the San Luis Valley to investigate a rash of new reports.
Somebody or something is killing these animals. And the shock to me was seeing these animals lie there, and they looked like they were just sleeping. But yet, their tongues were gone, the sexual organs were gone, the blood was gone.
Gail Stalin is a New Mexico-based livestock mutilation investigator. She has worked on over 50 cases, including 8 in 1996 alone. She is now concentrating her efforts in the Taos area, where the most recent mutilations have taken place.
The authorities right now, I do not believe, are handling mutilations in a proper way, or let's say a more professional way.
What I hope to change is to impose a forensic protocol on the cattle mutilations. I would like to see an organized response from the government to address this issue, to investigate cattle mutilations as a crime scene.
John Paternoster made the cattle mutilations a central issue in his recent bid for district attorney of Taos.
It's a growing mystery. It's a significant economic impact on the ranchers, and they deserve a response.
Carlos Trujillo is a cattle rancher in Peñasco, a remote town south of Taos. Just before our arrival, Trujillo had found his prize bull dead. Organs, including the heart, had been removed with an eerie surgical precision. Trujillo told local field investigator Michael Abbey that he was dissatisfied with the county inspector's findings. This was not the work of a coyote.
I talked to the inspector personally, and he said that it was some kind of a predator or coyote. Well, if them coyotes have knives like that, I mean, we're in a heap of trouble. We're in a heap of trouble.
Like many local ranchers, Trujillo doesn't know where to turn next.
It hurts. It hurts in the pocket.
The ranchers are frustrated, there's no question about that, about the lack of any kind of a response, a uniform, significant response from government.
As part of this investigation, sightings traveled to Albuquerque to try and get some answers from John Wortman, the director of the New Mexico Livestock Board, the state agency charged with investigating cattle mutilations.
I can't say that we've actually determined the specific cause of death in any of those. Some we've got a higher probability of that maybe they died of natural causes or struck by lightning or were killed by a predator or whatever. Yes, there are some of those that have been reported that we just have no explanation, but that's not to say that there was some deep, dark mystery about why they died. We just don't have a reason for why they were killed. We haven't been as careful with crime scenes in some of these mutilations as you would like to have if you're going to try to find evidence. And in some of these cases, there's very little evidence there. And when you walk in there and start rolling these animals around trying to figure out why they died, you destroy whatever evidence is there.
In those cases that remain unresolved, the Livestock Board believes that a conventional explanation will be found.
We think that there are individuals out there that are mutilating for whatever reasons, either ritual activities or vengeance or just pure vandalism.
The assertion by the New Mexico Livestock Board that there's cult activity behind these cattle mutilations or malicious vandalism, I have to say, is based, from my knowledge, on insufficient or completely absent evidence. It seems to me that everybody's got a lot of theories, but nobody's got a lot of hard evidence.
One prevailing theory connects the mutilations to UFOs.
Well, as an official here in response to the aliens are taking our cattle hypothesis, I understand there are people out there that firmly believe that. And I guess I can't prove that that's not true. We have no evidence that would point that direction. And at this point, we're not pursuing that as a possibility of the problem.
Eventually, better forensic procedures may help officials cope with mutilations mystery. But for now, it's an economic burden for the ranchers and a mystery to the community at large.
We don't know. And until we do know from hard evidence obtained at the scene in a forensically responsible way, we're just guessing.
Gail Stalin isn't waiting for the wheels of government to turn in her favor. She takes this issue personally and continues to fight for the ranchers.
I'm going to continue investigating these mutilations because I truly believe that eventually we will find the answers.